Hi, this is Phil Huber, pastor of Inlet Community Church. Glad for another opportunity to bring some spiritual nourishment. Romans chapter 13, verses 1 through 7. Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers hold no terror for those who do right, but for those who do wrong. Do you want to be free from the fear of the one in authority? Then do what's right and you will be commended. For the one in authority is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid. For rulers do not bear the sword for no reason. They are God's servants, agents of wrath to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. Therefore, it is necessary to submit to the authorities, not only because of possible punishment, but also as a matter of conscience. This is also why you pay taxes, for the authorities are God's servants who give their full time to governing. Give to everyone what you owe them. If we owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor. In previous postings, we've talked about God's sovereignty. None of this that we're experiencing, the virus, and the shutdown, and quarantine, and death toll, and relief package, and phased reopening, none of this takes God by surprise. He has ordained it all. And already we've talked about how God could ordain something so tragic, that he has good purposes and can bring good out of evil circumstances. But God's sovereignty trickles down through every crack in creation. As Abraham Kuyper famously said, there is not a square inch in the whole domain of our human existence over which Christ, who is sovereign over all, does not cry, mine. There is no darkened corner, no dead-end back road, no insignificant byway where God's sovereignty does not reach. He's sovereign over what appears to be the most random acts in the world. Proverbs 16:33 says, the lot is cast in the lap, but its every decision is from the Lord. Even the random coin flip is not immune from God's sovereign control. Matthew 6 reminds us that it's God who feeds the birds of the air, which means that every roll of the dice in Las Vegas and every tiny bird that falls in the forest, all of this is by God's sovereign command. Hard as it is to believe, that even includes the dark recesses of political maneuvering. Recently, many of us just finished reading the book of Daniel following the Encounter with God reading schedule. As Daniel's testimony 4 times over to both Nebuchadnezzar and his son Belshazzar was consistent and clear. The Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms and gives them to anyone he wishes. Daniel 4:17, Daniel 4:25, Daniel 4:32, Daniel 5:21. 4 times over, to 2 different rulers, God affirms that he is the one who ultimately distributes power. This point is reaffirmed in the New Testament by Jesus when he says to Pilate in John 19:11, you would have no authority over me unless it was given you from above. Pilate, Nebuchadnezzar, Belshazzar, these are not rulers who worshiped God. They were not moral pillars, defenders of justice. They were arrogant, violent, greedy, and self-indulgent. And still, Daniel and Jesus remind these pagan rulers that their authority was not autonomous. Seen from a broader perspective, we realize that politics is merely a method that God uses to accomplish his will. And even when people who are evil or foolish or selfish or shallow are in positions of power, that does not undermine God's sovereign purpose to work through them. In part, that means our responsibility is to respect and submit to the authorities that God has placed in control. not out of deference toward them so much as out of deference toward God. We see beyond the puppets to the puppet master. So Paul says in Romans 13, "Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except what God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God." By submitting to the governing authorities, we are, in fact, submitting to God. And by rebelling against them, we are consequently then rebelling against God. So Romans 13 verse 2 says, "Whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and those who do so will bring judgment on themselves." When Paul wrote this, Nero was emperor. Nero, who was aggressively anti-Christian, who was an active persecutor of the church. Nero, who was given to extravagance and violence, who murdered his own mother, who, legend has it, fiddled while Rome burned, and who is rumored to have started that great fire to clear space for a new palace that he was having built. Now, legend and rumor may not be true, but that at least speaks to his reputation. This fits his character. He's a violent, impulsive, selfish ruler. And yet Paul can insist that we are to submit to the governing authorities, even those who are godless and brutal. God ordained the authority as part of his plan. And there are times, of course, when obedience is impossible. When any authority directly commands us to disobey God, we must choose obedience to God over any human ruler. So when Peter and the apostles are forbidden to speak about Jesus publicly in Acts 5, they refuse to obey and say, "We must obey God rather than human beings." Acts 5:29. But these cases are rare, and even then, disobedience should be done respectfully and with the full realization that we will pay the price, that we will bear the consequences. For the Christians in Acts chapter 5, that included flogging for which it says they rejoiced because they had been considered worthy of suffering disgrace for the name of Christ. So what does that mean for us today? Well, I think in part that means that we should submit to the directives of our governing authorities, whether we agree with them or not. That means that when they tell me to social distance, that when they issue stay-at-home orders, when they limit public gatherings, when they tell businesses that they have to shut down, when they require face masks in public, I should comply without grumbling, without opinionated rants. If God wanted me in a position to be making public policy, he would have put me in that position. But he hasn't. So my role is to submit to them and follow their directives. Sadly, from the beginning, the handling of this virus has really broken along party lines. As Rahm Emanuel said, you never want a serious crisis to go to waste. So why not use this to leverage your own agenda? Republicans have suggested that their aggressive handling of the situation has saved many lives and prevented the spread of the virus. Democrats have argued that the slow and inadequate response has been responsible for more sickness and death than necessary. Pretty tightly along party lines, the arguments have been made that we are either exaggerating the dangers of this virus and killing the economy, or that we are underplaying the severity of this virus and choosing economic vitality over human life. As states have begun to open, some are saying it's about time, while others insist it's too soon. In the midst of that, we leave no room for well-meaning people who are trying to navigate through a difficult and little understood viral outbreak that has never been experienced before to come to different conclusions. Any position other than mine is A, wrong, and B, driven by unseemly motives. It seems that we're quick to assign malevolence to those we disagree with. They're just trying to steal our freedom. They're only concerned about the economy. Fact is, our governing authorities, from the perspective of New York, true blue Democratic Governor Cuomo, and a fiery red Republican President Trump are on polar ends of the spectrum. The chances are good that you are frustrated with one or both of them and their policies surrounding this virus. But this I know, that God put them in that place for this season of our lives. They may not always make wise decisions, but those are their decisions to make, not mine. And it's too easy to Monday morning quarterback and second guess every choice made from the easy chair of having no responsibility. These are hard decisions with no real clarity of how this will play out. Are they overreacting? Underreacting? There's nothing simple about this. So maybe instead of criticizing, we should heed Paul's advice in 1 Timothy 2 and pray for those in authority over us, so that we can lead a tranquil and quiet life in all godliness and dignity. We may not have been given the responsibility of being a policymaker, but in prayer, we have the ear of the ultimate policymaker, the one who is sovereign over all.